This isn't a cry for help. It's a way for me to document my experiences. Every carrier seems to have had their own method. Some wrote directly in the policy manual, others scribbled notes on spare mail, receipts, napkins, or whatever was nearby. Even Rusty kept records of his adventures. This is my version. Only mine comes with feedback, a live audience. If you're reading this, congratulations. You're either bored, curious, or somehow trapped in the same mess I was. You can call me Rori. I'm 30 years old, a mail carrier, and the mother of 2 little boys who are equal parts chaotic and sweet. For the last 9 months, I've delivered mail on a route that doesn't exist on any official map. Well, that's not entirely true. There is a map. Sort of. The past carriers spent years piecing it together, writing notes in margins and marking places that shouldn't exist, but somehow do. I've added a few things myself, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This morning began as usual. I drank tea that I had grown, harvested, dried, and brewed myself while loading the day's mail into my sand-colored Jeep Wrangler. One of the few perks of spending too much time digging around in dirt is having a steady supply of tea. After a quick wave to the postmaster, I climbed in, started the engine, checked that I had the policy manual, and headed out of town. The first part of the route was uneventful. A few bills, a couple of catalogs, and one package containing what I strongly suspected was another ceramic frog for Mrs. Peterson's collection. I made my usual stops and tried not to think about how much caffeine I had already consumed before 8 in the morning. Then my phone buzzed from the passenger seat. Wren. A smile appeared before I even opened the message. Taking the boys to town. Need anything? A second message followed almost immediately. Cypress insists he needs dino nuggets. Cedar agrees, as if either of them had ever disagreed about nuggets. I laughed and typed back at a stop sign. Milk if you're already going. Maybe some bread if it's on sale. The reply came quickly. Got it. The boys say hi. Having kids means that no matter how strange your day gets, part of your mind is always somewhere else. Wondering if they remembered their shoes. Wondering what they're eating. Wondering how 2 tiny humans can create enough laundry to clothe a small nation. At that moment, my biggest concern was whether I remembered to start the dishwasher. I had no idea that by lunchtime I'd be questioning my sanity. It isn't long before I have to cross the bridge. The bridge marks the beginning of the deep route. Not officially, of course. There are no signs, and nobody at the post office acknowledges the difference. But every carrier knows where it begins. Beyond the bridge, the road narrows and winds between towering pines and rows of birch trees. Mailboxes become fewer. Driveways stretch deeper into the forest. My phone buzzed once before losing service, right on schedule. 9 months in, I barely noticed anymore. The deep route wasn't dangerous. At least, not usually. It was just different. I passed over Hollow Creek and felt the usual unease settle in. The shadows seemed deeper there, the woods quieter. Even the air felt heavier. Birds avoided Hollow Creek. The trees whispered when there wasn't enough wind to explain it. Most people would probably find it terrifying. They wouldn't be wrong. But strangely enough, I enjoyed the route. I've never been much of a people person. There's an awkwardness to me that most people don't notice. Every conversation feels like a puzzle everyone else already knows how to solve. Out here, things made more sense. The trees didn't expect small talk. The creek didn't care if I said the wrong thing, and most of the route's inhabitants seemed perfectly happy to leave me alone. The first familiar face of the morning was the fisherman. He stood beside Hollow Creek with a fishing rod in his hand. His back was turned toward the road. This wasn't unusual. The man was always fishing. Always. Creek, pond, river, lake. It didn't matter. If there was water nearby, the fisherman was probably there. In 9 months of carrying the route, I had never spoken to him. As far as I knew, none of the previous carriers had either. The policy manual didn't say much. Fisherman. Appears 30 to 40 years old, always fishing. Friendly, indifferent, likely resident. After a while, there wasn't much else to write. The man fished. That was it. Rain, sun, snow, drought. Nothing changed. Every carrier mentioned him. Nobody ever learned anything new. I slowed down as I passed. The fisherman didn't wave, didn't turn, didn't even acknowledge me. His attention stayed fixed on the water. I continued down the road. The creek followed beside me for another mile before disappearing behind the trees. Other than the occasional mailbox and a glimpse of water through the pines, there wasn't much to see. Just the road, the trees, and the familiar sound of the Jeep beneath me. I was already thinking about the campground, wondering if the Grangers would be watching again. That's when my phone buzzed. I frowned. That alone was strange. Service was usually impossible out there. I reached across the passenger seat to grab it. Then I saw it. A fox. It stepped out of the trees and into the road. I slammed on the brakes. The Jeep slid across the gravel and stopped. The fox didn't move. It just sat there staring at me. The fox had only one eye. The other side of its face was covered by a thick scar that disappeared into its fur. We stared at each other for what felt like too long. I don't know how to explain it. But the fox wasn't watching me. It felt like it was studying me, judging me, remembering me. And that thought should have sounded ridiculous. But it didn't. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the fox turned and walked back into the trees. Before disappearing completely, it stopped, looked back one last time, then it was gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. That's when I noticed the rearview mirror. A small wooden fox pendant was hanging there. The pendant swayed gently from the sudden stop. My uncle gave it to me years ago. Rusty, the carving wasn't perfect. One ear was higher than the other, the tail was too thick, but I loved it. So did he. Rusty always brought something back from his travels. Rocks, postcards, strange little objects from places I'd never heard of. Every item had a story. A piece of desert, a stone from a mountain trail, a coin from a town he somehow forgot the name of. There was always a story. Until one day, there wasn't. He left on another adventure and never came back. I stared at the fox pendant for another moment. Then I put the Jeep into gear. The mail wasn't going to deliver itself. The first stop in the deep route was always Hollow Creek Campground. And I use the word campground loosely. There was a main cabin near the entrance that probably served as a check-in office. People didn't reserve spots there. They just found it. And I always felt sorry for the people who did. Most eventually found their way back. Some didn't. I had never seen anyone inside the check-in cabin. But that didn't mean the place was empty. There were residents. The Grangers, for example. Their camper sat near the entrance beneath the trees. As far as I knew, neither of them ever stepped outside. But you saw them, standing behind the blinds, watching, always watching. The policy manual didn't say much about the Grangers. The Grangers, husband and wife, never observed outside the camper, always staring through the blinds. Residents, harmless, but damn weird. Underneath that, someone had written an addendum in different handwriting. Wife was crying today. Same staring, same blinds, but tears running down her face, not sticking around to see why. The note was dated 14 years ago. Nobody added anything after that. I pulled up beside the camper and grabbed the package from the passenger seat. It was always the same. Same size, same weight, same neat handwriting. No return address, no clue what was inside. Just the Granger's name and the campground. 9 months on the route, I had probably delivered that package 50 times. And I still had no idea where it came from, or why it kept coming. All I knew was that it made my skin crawl every single time. I placed the package in its usual spot. The blinds twitched. That was it. No greeting, no thank you, no movement except the quiet shift of fabric behind the window. I walked back toward the Jeep, trying not to look, and failing. Both of them were standing there behind the blinds, watching me leave. I got back into the Jeep and continued on. The rest of the route was familiar. The mailbox at the end of an empty driveway, no house, no foundation, just a mailbox and a road disappearing into the trees. The mail always vanished by the next day. Then came Mrs. Alder, the playground, the bus stop, the usual landmarks, the usual deliveries. Normally, the routine comforted me, but that day my thoughts kept returning to the fox, the missing eye, the scar, the way it sat in the road like it had been waiting. I kept checking the tree line, but I never saw it again. Eventually, the road curved, the trees became thinner, and the motel appeared. Not a motel, the motel. The deep route only had one. The building looked like something abandoned decades ago. The paint was faded. Rust covered the railings. The vacancy sign flickered day and night, even though nobody ever checked in. Nobody ever checked out. The motel deserved its own story. Actually, several. For now, there was one thing you needed to know. Some residents were better avoided, especially room 14. The woman inside room 14 was one of the few people on the route I truly disliked. Not because she was rude, she was the opposite. She was always polite, always helpful. That was the problem. When I first started carrying the route, I didn't read the policy manual carefully enough. I was new, overconfident, and convinced most warnings were exaggerated. So when the woman from room 14 smiled and offered me a shortcut, I listened. She said it would save 20 minutes. I thanked her, and I took it. For the first 10 minutes, the shortcut worked. The road was smooth. Everything looked normal. I remember feeling proud of myself. Then the trees started thinning, the gravel narrowed, and suddenly my Jeep was heading toward the edge of a cliff. No guardrail, no warning signs, just empty space. I stopped just in time, barely. When I finally got home, I was angry and shaken. That's when I actually read the entry I ignored. Room 14. Do not accept advice, directions, favors, warnings, invitations, or requests. Below it was another note. Carrier accepted invitation for tea. Never returned. And below that, another message. Additional addendum. Stop accepting things from room 14. That was all. No explanation, no date, no name. Just a warning from someone who was tired of watching people make the same mistake. I followed that rule ever since. I slipped her mail through the slot and walked away. Room 9 came next. Something scratched behind the door. Slow, steady, like fingernails moving across wood. I ignored it, delivered the mail, and kept walking. The scratching stopped only when I was far away. Room 10 was my final stop. I pushed the envelope through the mail slot. Then I turned to leave. A hand shot through the opening. It grabbed my wrist. I screamed and pulled back. The grip tightened. Pain shot through my arm. For a moment, I thought it was going to pull me through the door. Panic started taking over. Then a voice came from inside. Low. Quiet. Almost like it felt sorry for me. He found you. My stomach dropped. Before I could ask who he meant, the hand disappeared. The mail slot slammed shut. Silence. I stood there rubbing my wrist, trying to slow my breathing. A bruise was already forming. For the first time in 9 months, I seriously considered leaving, going home, never coming back. But every carrier eventually learns the same lesson. You don't quit the route. You finish it. I got back into the Jeep. The engine started. The road waited. And I kept driving. Because the deep route doesn't care if you're afraid. It doesn't care if you understand. It only cares that you keep delivering. And now you know my story.